I used to manage multi-million-pound projects while I was drinking every spare minute and no one had a clue. This one decision changed everything. For me, it wasn't about quitting alcohol, it was about leadership. Being that man that your kids could look up to and understand myself at a much deeper level. I went from absolute chaos, high performing in sports and in business, to a father who puts his family first, sober, free, much more focused, and still highly successful in business and my sports. So don't worry, this isn't going to be one of those victim sad stories. This is actually one of these things that I've been asked week after week, and I will tell you a little bit about my story. So for many years, which may be hard to believe, but this is quite normal in Scotland and some parts of the UK. From a very young teenager, we're talking maybe 12-year-old, I absolutely loved drinking. I loved the adrenaline, I loved the excitement, and at that point I just thought I was having fun and I didn't fully understand it. I didn't even care. I was having fun, I was young. Now that continued throughout my early life and into my adult life. And I have to say I enjoyed almost every minute of it. There was some points I didn't like when you felt dirty, I didn't like when you felt weak, and I didn't like that mental weakness. When you have a hangover, you maybe not slept for a couple of days properly, not eaten properly, and you wake up and you feel like the whole world's against you, you feel down, and yeah, I never liked that feeling, but no one does. The easiest thing for me was just brush it off, get back out drinking, and back to having fun again. Now, I was always relatively strong. I was always good at sports, one of the best at sports out of my friends and schools and different things like that. I was always used to be good at things. And what I realised with alcohol is I started to feel very weak. Things that I could do easily before were becoming difficult because I wasn't eating properly, I wasn't sleeping properly. I would exercise. I always exercised, but it was something that really used to bug me, was feeling weak. I'd never felt mentally or physically weak in my life. And yes, my parents, they obviously were not very impressed with my drinking. They put a lot of effort into my upbringing. I had a very good upbringing. I'm not one of those people who was drinking because their parents were bad to them. They didn't educate them. They didn't treat them right for wrong. So 100% my fault. And once you get into a young teenager, it's very hard for your parents to control you. So this continued into my adult life. It actually just got worse and worse the more money I earned because I could fuel my bad habit even more. The one thing that always stuck with me though is people would always say to me, how can you drink so much? And I wouldn't like to estimate how much I was drinking, but I can tell you now, it is well over what anyone would believe. But one thing that always stuck with me, and this is why I wanted to share this story, because it may help some people out there. People would always say to me, how can you drink so much and then just stop drinking and go and ride your motorbikes? I used to do a lot of motocross, or just stop drinking because you want to go to the gym, or just stop drinking because you have to go back to the oil rig, or you have a business meeting so you stop drinking. Now, to many people that would be normal life, but the amount we were drinking continuously, day after day, no sleep, we were basically highly functioning alcoholics, still had jobs, getting into a lot of trouble, doing a lot of things that you would never normally do if you didn't have alcohol in your system. And yeah, but this one thing, how can you always do this? And I used to just say, well, I need to go to work, I need to earn money, I want to go out on my motorbike. I didn't really have that addiction to alcohol. I didn't have that feeling, I must drink, I must drink. If I didn't drink for 1 or 2 days, I could not care less about alcohol. I loved the chaos. I loved chasing adrenaline. I loved all of that madness that came with alcohol. I loved going to festivals. I loved the loud music. And a big part of me always thought I was chasing the excitement, which part of me was. The other part, which I didn't realise till later on, was I was switching off my extreme task-orientated brain and my analytic mind. Now, with my personality type and the way I think, I'm always analysing data. It doesn't matter, I can't switch off. It can be really annoying sometimes, but it can also be a superpower in a project or managing businesses or trying to achieve certain goals. I'm also extremely task orientated, so if I have a task in my mind, I must complete that task, and there's nothing I can do to switch off my brain unless I get a more important task. And I'll explain some of this a bit further because this was also part of the solution. But yes, that was the one thing I could say, or the only other thing I could say, that I was using alcohol to numb my personality type, my brain down a little bit, so I could chill out and just relax and have fun. So what I did notice, I was drinking with big groups of different people. You know, one week it was some people, other weeks it was other people. What I did notice with most of them had obvious problems, whether it was from their childhood, things they've went through, things they were currently going through, and maybe some of them with unaddressed mental health issues, and you know, various different things. And to me, this was very obvious, but even more obvious once I stopped drinking and once I started looking at human behaviours and psychology. I couldn't use that excuse, but I can understand now that I was trying to numb that extreme task orientated and analytic high D and high C type personality. So that's a little bit about my story. I won't go into some of the crazy things that happened and some of the things that you maybe regret as you grow older. But the next phase of my life, I went through this glorified alcoholic part. I was working offshore. I was being promoted and climbing up the ladder very quickly. I was highly performing at work. I also had a property business. I was doing a lot of things. From the outsider looking in, who didn't see what I was doing at home, I was extremely high performing for someone in their early 20s. I was actually at the point when I was on the oil rig, I couldn't actually speak about most of the things that I was doing because people would think I was insane. They probably wouldn't actually believe half of them. So at that point, I would come straight back from offshore and I would go straight on holiday. And the minute I landed onshore from the oil rig, I would be drinking every day until I went back to work again. I was at the point where I had different bottles of vodkas in almost every nightclub in every city that I'd visited. They had black marker with my name on it. I would go back the next day and just continue drinking it. I was drinking vodka with breakfast, I was drinking vodka with lunch, and I was having the time of my life. It was a great time. I don't regret any of it. This isn't a sad story in any way. I'm just going to share some of the stuff after this, which helped me understand myself so I could make improvements. So yeah, really living the high life, successful in business, successful at work, and traveling to all these beautiful countries. But the reality is just highly functioning alcoholics with a little bit of money to fund this lavish lifestyle. So I did actually meet my wife in Kiev as part of that 3 years of traveling, and we ended up in a relationship, and then we ended up she fell pregnant. When she fell pregnant, that was a massive change in my life. Now, I always remembered going to all these different parties, going to different countries, different places, and one of the things that was really alien to me is people's children appearing while people were drinking, and they were quite normalised to that. I don't actually think I'd ever seen my parents drunk. I had seen them drinking a little bit occasionally at New Year though, and that was throughout my whole childhood. So to me, that was quite an unusual thing. There was never any harm to these children. It was just unusual for me to see them around that kind of environment. And I always thought to myself, once I found out my wife was pregnant, I could never allow my children to see some of the things that I had seen. Now, at that point in my life, that was a massive change because I had zero responsibilities other than business and work. I did not have to answer to anyone, and I wasn't responsible for a little life that was going to be coming into the world. So once my son was born, I did drink quite a lot of the time, nowhere near as much up until he was born. But once he was born, that was pretty much no more drinking, and I just stopped. And people would ask me, how can you just stop drinking? How can you go from this guy who's drinking over 3 litres of vodka a day with beer and champagne and tequila and whatever else was there? How could you go from being that person to just the next day, I don't drink anymore and that's it? And for many, that is quite unusual. And I didn't understand it myself really, because I've seen many people who ended up dead, in prison, in major trouble, financial trouble, health, mental health problems. So this was quite unusual. Now, at that time, I was studying human behaviours, psychology, relationship building, And the reason for that is because I wanted to be more successful at work. Like I say, I've always had that task-oriented mindset. When I read something, I am reading these things to improve something in my life. So there was a point where I had a bit of an aha moment when I was reading about personality profiling. So this question that many people kept asking me and still ask me now, how can you just stop drinking and cut it out, and that is it? Just like an instant decision. I'd done it every month going to work. I never had issues with stopping alcohol. Now, what I realised in my research through personality profile and various other things, but the personality profiling was one of the biggest understanding for me. With my personality type, it was very much environment based, the issues I was having. Now, I take full responsibility for everything I'd done. I was one of the worst people for drinking out my group, and there was never anyone who was leading me astray. It was always, I would drink on my own. I didn't care if I had 10 people, one person, or I was on my own. I would be drinking. And it's very clear to acknowledge that before I speak about the next bit. So what I realised when I studied the personality profiling, when I was in, no matter what environment I was in, I would always strive to be the best I could be at something I was interested in. There's many things I'm not good at, so I just kind of dismiss them and don't really put any effort in, as many people do. But the things I do believe I'm good at and the things I am enjoying, I will give 100% and be absolutely committed to try and be the best version of myself, or best within whatever environment I'm. So when I was in negative environments, I was always striving to be the one who was drinking the most, staying awake the most, partying the most, seeing all these different nightclubs, getting into as much trouble as possible. Anything that you could think of, I was trying to be the best version, because I was really surrounding myself in a really negative environment. It was people who were committing crimes, they were drinking a lot, they were doing a lot of other bad things, they weren't looking after any of their responsibilities. Some of them were involved in various other things that I wouldn't discuss here. And I strived, without even thinking about it, to be the best in that environment. And the end result of that was try to drink as much as I can, party, all the things I just mentioned. And then I thought, when I take myself out of this environment, now again, not any of the people's faults, most of them are really good guys actually, and girls, and had some great times with them. And yeah, not their fault at all. So when I put myself into a different environment, where it was all positive people, and when I say positive people, I just mean the environment was positive, not all the people there were positive, really happy type people. The environment was positive, so it was professional, there was people completing tasks, there was work, there was no alcohol, people weren't doing bad things. You basically turned up to work, done all these things, completed all these little missions, and then you go home. Projects, not missions. Then you go back into your negative environment and you strive to be bad again. So I was high performing in the positive environment when it was only positive things I could do, high performing in the negative environment. And that is when I really realised that quite often, for many people, it is about their environment. So one of the things when my son was born, I had to remove myself from that environment. Now, you can't, in many cases, remove yourself from an environment without upsetting a lot of people, because removing yourself from an environment often means you're having to cut a lot of people out of your life because they are still behaving in that negative way that you don't want to behave like. So for a short time, because I didn't have any positive minded friends or people that were wanting to do the things I wanted to achieve, I became a bit of a recluse. Not a recluse in terms of, well, not a recluse wouldn't be the right word. I cut almost everyone out of my life, and I focused on doing the right things for my family, doing the right things for business, doing the right things at work, and going to the gym and focusing on my coaching business. Now, that is one of the best things I've ever done. And this, to other people, might have felt a bit rude or insulting. I can say now, absolutely nothing to do with them as individuals or people, because I actually like them all. And it is just, you cannot continue doing the same thing in that environment if you want to change. So I would always think people who didn't drink were boring. And I said that so many times. I also, for the first few months of not drinking, I was incredibly bored. I thought, this is such a boring life, there's no excitement, there's no adrenaline. And then I start to realize that actually when you rely on alcohol so much, alcohol is like, it becomes a prison almost. It's like, you must go here, let's have a drink before we go. Like in Scotland, for example, I know it's not like this in every country. Let's go nightclub, so we'll have a quick bottle of vodka before we go nightclub, and then we'll have a bottle of vodka on the train, get into the nightclub, and then we'll go into the nightclub and we'll have lots of drink and whatever else. And then we'll come back to a party, another few bottles of vodka, and then in the morning, another few bottles, and this just continues. It was great fun and it was exciting, but when you have that, you know, let's go to the golf and have some drink, let's go to bowling, have some drink, anything. I'm just trying to think of a different place. It was always alcohol, alcohol, alcohol. You weren't actually enjoying anything there. Let's listen to some music, have a drink. It took me so many months to break that, and I actually realised once I looked back, actually people who drink are the most boring people on the planet. Once I started doing loads of activities outside of drinking and actually enjoying the activity and looking and seeing, there's much more to life than just being drunk all the time. I realised that I'd travelled around most of the world and not actually seen anything other than nightclubs. Should have just saved money and went to the local city nightclub and got drunk all day. But I'd been all these amazing places. I can't remember any of them. I didn't see anything there. There was nothing to remember. I didn't leave pubs. And that's when I realised that actually people who drink are incredibly boring. So after months of not drinking, the brain started to work a bit better, you start to get a bit more creative, you start realising that there's actually millions of things out there that don't involve alcohol. And you can drink sometimes as well. I still drink sometimes, occasionally. It doesn't really interest me anymore. I'm not against alcohol, but I do think you can have alcohol, if you have one big blowout a year or something like that, there's nothing wrong with that, and you can have a glass of wine with your dinner. I'm not anti-alcohol at all. So that was two huge things, was understanding myself, understanding my environments, and understanding how I perform in different environments. And actually understanding that made it a lot easier, because when you understand something and you have a desire to make changes, it's very easy. Especially with my task-oriented mindset, I've got a task, I'm very disciplined, I just do it. I don't have that long procrastinating and things. So yeah, that's enough about my story. I think you get the point. And also on top of that, I had I wanted to be a role model for my children. I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be a man my kids look up to and think my dad is a respectable guy. He's cool, he's, intelligent. And part of that as well wasn't just about stroking my own ego. I wanted to be a positive influence on their life, so when they grow up and this is what they see a man should be, instead of seeing a pathetic, weak alcoholic who doesn't take care of his responsibilities, has no money, stinks, tells you about how cool he used to be and all these great things he used to do, and but they never actually experienced it, so they just heard some tales while you're drinking your bottle of vodka telling them. I did not want to be that man. So one of the things I would recommend or challenge you to go and try is you can go and get personality profiling done. And the reason I'm going to say to do this yourself is because this can be so beneficial in many areas. It can be great for leadership, it can be great for relationships, it can be great for addiction, it can be great for even performance in sports, teamwork. Understanding yourself is so important. There's so many people looking at other people and what they're doing wrong. Have a look at yourself, understand yourself and think, what am I doing wrong? Once you know what you're doing wrong, you make minor changes. You might see a lot more of what other people are doing wrong, or you might have realised it was actually you who needed to change. So go away and you can get like a leadership report done. It doesn't have to be about leadership, but the leadership report I find to be one of the best ones. You can see Robert Romm's DISC, for example. He will ask you loads of questions and you answer them honestly. You'll get a big report and it will explain to you a lot more about yourself. Now take that away and go away and read it all, digest it. Ask your closest friends or family, is this what you see of me? Because you will get something about how other people see you, how you act in certain environments, and maybe how you see yourself. And it's important to understand all these, but ask other people, is this what you see of me? And then you might understand or realize, once you understand more about yourself, why you maybe choose to take drugs or use alcohol or even some of these other annoying little behaviours don't like. I had a recent conversation with someone because they basically put every single person first. Now, they are a high S type supportive person, but once he understood that, he was able to then go and look and say, you know what, I can change this. One of the things he didn't like was saying no to people. So this report explains to you, when you're dealing with other personality types, the ones that were taking advantage of him, how he can say no. So yeah, give that a try. Look at yourself, understand yourself, make the adjustments in your life that is required, and if really necessary, you may need to change your environment. If you need to change your environment, you don't need to be rude about it. You need to take responsibility and put your hand up and say, look, I'm changing my environment because I can't perform or be the way I want to be in this environment. It's not your fault. You've done nothing wrong. This is all about me. People understand it. People understand. As long as you're not rude, bad-mouthing the people, and you're honest and say it's your problem. Now, people will never mind if you are trying to improve yourself. If they are real friends, they will celebrate your successes. They will support you, and once you have managed to fix your environment and you're in a more positive place, they will be standing there with open arms, waiting to say, congratulations. Real friends will always help you. If they don't, the good thing about that is it's their way of putting their hand up to say, I'm not your real friend, you probably don't need me in your life anyway. Now, I hope that's been very helpful. It is a useful tool for all aspects of life. Improving your business, your performance, your relationships with friends, family, colleagues. It really can help so much. We're very quick to look at what other people are doing. This allows you to understand yourself better, but also within doing this, part of the process, it allows you to identify other people's personality types, and it allows you to adjust your behaviours to work with them. Then you realise that actually most of the time you were a huge part of the problem. So I hope this has been helpful. If this is something that you don't want to do on your own, you can give us a shout. We can go through a strategy call with you. We can see what's holding you back, and if you do need our help to implement any of these things, I have a lot of experience in working with people with similar issues, and this is one strategy that we have used with many clients in the past with great success. And there are many other tactics that you can use out there to help you, but if you have found this useful, I'd like to know below. Thank you for watching.